Hello and welcome. Danette here. In today's episode, we're going to talk about 5 key metrics that you need to think about if you're retiring early. There's a few things to consider when you're retiring early that come up that you might not be aware of. We're going to talk about Social Security and a little bit about the calculation. We're going to talk about Medicare and health insurance. We're going to talk a little bit about taking money out of IRAs. We're going to talk about longevity and inflation and how that can impact your decision to retire early. And last, we're going to talk about the stock market and the ebbs and flows of the stock market and a little tiny bit of a rant, a little bit of a pet peeve I have on the stock market. So that's our agenda for today. I think this is going to be very interesting. I think you're going to enjoy hearing about some of these topics. If you're planning on retiring early, these are things that you might need to consider and talk to a professional about. Hello, Danette here, and welcome to the Ready to Retire podcast, where we share real-life stories and actionable tips and strategies to help you along your financial journey. Are you ready to retire? Let's go. So the first thing we want to talk about today is Social Security and the impact if you're going to retire early. I would consider retiring early is before the age of 60. It could be a little bit different for you. You could have a different time frame in your mind, but anytime we're talking about under the age of 60, I would consider that early retirement. What happens for Social Security is that Social Security is going to look at the highest 35 years of earnings. So if you're retiring in your 50s, let's say, there's a potential that your earlier years of working had a lower income, and it could affect your estimate. When you download your Social Security statement, it is giving you an estimate, assuming that you're going to work till full retirement age. So the number that you see on the Social Security estimate might be less if you retire significantly early. All of the tips that we're going to go over today, including this one, it will make sense if you're not sure to meet with a financial planner and talk about them. This is probably the biggest area that we help our clients with is when clients are retiring early, because there's so many subtle things that you have to think about. You can go online and download your Social Security statement, which I highly recommend doing regardless of your intention to retire early or not. And we're going to link a couple of resources for Social Security in the description. The next thing I want to talk about is Medicare and health insurance. Medicare will kick in at the age of 65 if you're eligible. If you are retiring early and leave your employer, then you may be without a period of having to pay for your medical insurance on your own. And this can be an extraordinarily expensive proposition, because the insurance companies know that when you turn 65, you're going to go on to Medicare. So it seems like the last few years before you turn 65, private medical insurance is very expensive. It can be easily $2,000 per month per person as you get close to age 65 before Medicare comes in. So if you're going to retire early, this is a big thing to look at, the cost and the expense of your own private medical insurance. I hope you've been enjoying this episode so far. And I just want to take a minute to ask you to hit that like button and subscribe I'm so excited because we can finally ask you to like our episode. That wasn't something we were able to do when we first started. So if you're enjoying these, then please take a moment to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and we'll get back into it. Number 3, if you're going to retire early, is taking money out of your IRA. Unless you're 59 and a half, if you take money out of your IRA, there's going to be a 10% early withdrawal penalty. And the 10% penalty is on the amount that's taken out. And so if you're 50 and you need to access money from your IRA to fund your early retirement, then you're going to want to look into doing something called a 72T distribution. This is something that you definitely need help with to do the calculations. 72T has about 3 different ways to get the calculation, but it is a way to take out money from your IRA without penalty prior to age 59 and a half. The key here is you have to take substantially equal payments for at least 5 years. But the real key is don't try to do these calculations by yourself, because if you get it wrong, then the penalties are really high. So keep in mind for early retirement that accessing money from accounts like IRAs is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So keep that in mind, something important to think about. Number 4 is longevity and inflation. How long are you going to live? When Social Security was enacted, they set the retirement age at the age of 65, and our life expectancy at the time was 67. So when Social Security was enacted, the government didn't expect that they would be paying out for years and years. And now, fast forward to today, our life expectancy is easily in the 80s. And if you're already in your 50s and 60s, it's even longer. It is not uncommon at all for people to be living well into their 90s, if not 100s. So if you're going to retire early before the age of 60, let's say, this is something that you're really going to have to plan on is what are the effects of inflation going to be on living a long lifetime? Inflation is at obviously really high levels right now, but the Fed doesn't target zero inflation. The Fed monetary policy allows for and is comfortable with 2% inflation. That's their target. So if you have 2 to 3% inflation, say, and you live 40 years in retirement, the cost of living could easily triple. That's a big consideration to make with your investments, to make with how you're calculating your funds to use in retirement. So keep longevity and inflation at the top of your mind when you're thinking about retiring early. Number 5, the ebbs and flows of the stock market. If you're retiring early and you have a 20, 30, 40-year time horizon, you are going to see the stock market go up and down during that time period. So when the stock market is doing its thing and going up and down, the stock market is trying to predict what is really happening. So it really is based on kind of fundamental analysis. It's trying to figure out what's really going on, and then it's trying to estimate what's going to happen in the future a little bit. So that's why we see the stock market going up and down as much as we do, because it's never clear at the time. They're trying to do a little bit of forecasting on earnings. So as a consumer, one of the things that we can look at to give us a clear idea of which direction the market's going to go in the long term is something called the jobs numbers. If we want to look at the unemployment rate, which is how many people are working, you want to look at the number of hours people are working per week. And if that number is increasing, That means consumers are receiving more money so they can spend more money. And we want to look at the number of hours per week people are working. So those are three things that can give us an idea of what's going to be happening in the stock market. That's a really important thing to look at, is these collection of jobs numbers. How many people are working? Are they getting paid more per hour? And are they working more hours per week? I think it's one of the most important things, and that's all we should see on the news. At the beginning of the episode, I promised a rant, if you will. My rant is that sometimes on the news, we can have positive economic numbers come out, but they are not as positive as the expectations. And so sometimes the news media makes it sound worse. So sometimes you can hear we gained 100,000 jobs last quarter, but it was way down from expectations. We expected to gain 180,000 jobs, or whatever that difference is. And when we're watching the news, then they can really beat up the fact that we missed the expectation, instead of really saying, hey, look, we gained 100,000 jobs last quarter. That's still pretty good. And so that's something that I just want you to have in the back of your mind when the stock market is doing its ups and downs, is that this is normal. It's to be expected. And when the market does go down, it does tend to be temporary. And we do have something called, federal monetary policy, and they do a pretty good job of getting us back on track when things go wonky. So that is my little rant. And those are the 5 things that I think we should think about if we're retiring early. The first one we talked about is Social Security and what the impact will be on your estimate because of working less than 35 years, if that's what you end up doing, or at least not getting your highest pay at 35 years. We talked about Medicare and health insurance and the cost of funding your own insurance. We talked about taking money from an IRA, what a possible exception to the rule, possibly being able to take it prior to the age of 59 and a half. We talked about longevity and inflation, and we talked about the normal stock market ebbs and flows and what that might look like over a long period of time. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. I'm so grateful to have you join me today on the Ready to Retire podcast. If you'd like to learn more information, please visit our website at truenorthwealth.com. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.